really tried to threaten me, death threats. Turns out that nobody was interested in prevention. It's just a harder sell. I had to convince the whole startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia that I wasn't there for the wrong reasons. I was really there to help them. And so
Today's guest is a multi-time founder, startup ecosystem builder, and one of the most courageous and impactful voices in tech. Cheryl Sew Hoy is the founder and CEO of Tiny Health, the leading microbiome health platform using cutting-edge sequencing to help people from infants to adults optimize their gut microbiome. In just a few years, she's scaled Tiny Health to serve over 55,000 families, forging partnerships with practitioners, researchers, and health brands, tackling chronic disease, performance, and longevity. But Cheryl's entrepreneurial journey did not start there. She previously founded and exited Reclip.it, which was acquired by Walmart Labs, served as CMO at Hack Reactor, and led a $30 million magic initiative under the Malaysian government with President Obama and the United States. We dive into what kind of advisors you should have, figuring out product market fit, and even founder market fit. From gut health to government policy, from venture capital reform to motherhood and mindset, Cheryl's story is one of resilience, reinvention, and revolutionary ideas. Join us for this fascinating conversation. Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. It is with a huge amount of pleasure. I have a friend and someone I've known a long time, and actually I'm an investor in her amazing company. Cheryl Sew Hoy is with me today. So she's kind of seen all the different sides of what it means to be a founder in general, a female founder, which shouldn't have any challenges or any differences, but sometimes probably does. Cheryl, welcome to the show.
Hey, Adam. This is going to be fun. I'm excited to be on your show.
Excellent. So Cheryl, I like to ask people right when we get started, one same question every time. If you have to define entrepreneurial excellence, what does that actually mean to you? Like, what is an excellent entrepreneur?
To be really good at solving a big problem that people need and do it really well.
So when you think through that, right? So, I mean, I agree, but like every founder listening to this probably says, I'm solving a big problem. And my assumption is that I'm going to do great work. So I'll push you on that a little bit, like really like dig in, right? There's a difference between you and a lot of other founders, right? You and I both know we've been in this game a long time. We both know lots and lots of founders who are brilliant, smart, wonderful people. And yet they failed to raise more than $1 million ever in their entire fundraising career. They've never had a successful outcome in anything that they built. What is still, there's a difference between those two things. So go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So the difference really is in your head that you as a founder, you assume this is a big problem that you're trying to solve, but can you validate it, right? So I think the difference between what I said in terms of like, can you solve a problem that is big enough? I think the best founders usually try to solve their own problem, and then they believe that a lot of people have a similar problem. And then what you want to do is to validate that market is big enough, right, to pursue. Because there's also an entrepreneurship is a pretty big word. There are different kinds of businesses in entrepreneurship. There are venture fundable ones. There are some that are, not venture fundable, right, which is totally fine. Some people want to build empires and a legacy of businesses they pass on generationally to their families that is profit-oriented. And not to say that venture-funded companies aren't profitable, but if you want to build a venture-fundable growth company, then it has to be in the billion-dollar market, right? It has to be a mass market. And so you just have to first, I would say, look into what kind of businesses you want to build. And do you want a venture fundable business? If so, then you want to validate that your market is large enough. And then your problem, the problem you're trying to solve matters to a lot of people, right? So I think for me, it's really important. As you mentioned, I built a couple of businesses. And the first company I built, I did end up selling it to Walmart Labs. So it got acquired in 2013. But it was more an acqui-hire, I have to admit it. It was kind of a small exit. Still kind of not super meaningful, but it's my first exit, right?
So it's still a win, and you get to kind of have that win, and then you build on that, right? You compound that win.
Yeah, it's led to many great things for sure. But I would say when I was validating that market, we were building kind of a digital wallet for daily deals or digital currency. This is before crypto was a thing. We started with daily deals, right? Those vouchers you were buying from Groupon and Living Social and whatnot. There was 600 companies. And then we were going to move on to gift cards and airline points and anything with the digital currency. We ended up pivoting to a coupon-based solution, like clipping coupons and stuff like that digitally, right? So that market turns out like because we pivoted from something that everyone kind of was able to do, like these vouchers, we had to pivot to like a coupon market, which I frankly like it was the Midwest moms that were doing a lot of the coupon clipping. And I wasn't one of them. So in the end, we decided to sell to Walmart Labs because I just didn't want to raise money on something that I didn't feel like it was quite the founder product fit, so to speak, even though it was a large market. So that's the other component to it too, is like, are you the right founder to solve that problem? Is the problem like important enough? Is it a vitamin? Is it a painkiller? And is the market large enough?
And how do you think, like, do you have any heuristics that you use to help identify those things? And I know you also advise some founders as well at times too, and you're an angel investor. So you really have your hands in a bunch of different areas. When you think through those two key points, like validating a market that's big enough, and then are you the right founder? Are there heuristics that you've used yourself to do that? And to be clear for the audience, right? Cheryl has, and tell me if I get this right, Cheryl, but like you founded companies in different industries, like all the different things you built. I mean, you I would say in some ways your resume, your background is really more of a marketer than anything else. And yet you now for the past 5 years have been in gut microbiome health. It's a very different space than where you came from. So clearly you have the expansive ability to move to different areas and do different things. How do you tell people you advise to validate that market is big enough? And by the way, I'll add one more part. Try to validating a market's big enough when also there's a lot of advice that says, hey, look, just find your one true fan. Like start with one true fan who's going to just utterly pay you nonstop and then grow from there. So how do you weigh those two things?
For sure. It's a really good question. And it's funny that you call me out as a marketer. I'm not really a marketer, but I would consider myself more of a product focused founder. I'm obsessed with product. And I think every founder should be more product focused. Marketing part comes in because I was a CMO at a couple of companies after my first, I sold my first startup to Walmart Labs, because I think I'm just maybe people recognize me as great at brand building a great brand that people trust. And ultimately trust is a part of like, how you built your community, your small community initially and then build it out. Right. So I'll come to that to answer your question too. So I think like when we started with, Tiny Health, for example, and we were thinking about the brand Tiny Health, like So we wanted to build a flagship product based on baby gut tests because there was no baby gut test in the market, and I can go into like all the story about why. But so Tiny Health may mean tiny babies, but from day one, I always knew that we would expand to the adult market. So tiny can also mean the tiny invisible microbes in your gut. So now we're quite in the adult longevity space. Now I can come back to it. But initially, when we launched in the baby space, we wanted to target that market because we knew it was a niche and a great entry point for us because parents would pay anything for their baby's gut issues or even like sleep issues, colicky symptoms, eczema, allergies, all kinds of things, right? That is relevant to their gut health. And so we thought it was a great market to enter. There was a lot of science there. The science was really strong. And how we tested the market was frankly through a lot of Google SEM, leveraging a small budget just to figure out what messaging resonated with parents. In fact, initially we had a few hypotheses. We thought, because my daughter was C-section born, she's 7 now, and she ended up having eczema, food sensitivities, like all kinds of issues. And I was reading literature that it was because of her C-section, she was exposed to my antibiotics during the operations. She wasn't bypassing the vaginal canal. So babies born via C-section have more of these chronic conditions.
Yeah.
So you would think that, okay, maybe the keyword that people were searching would be C-section, right? Or something like that, right? And then we have hypotheses where, okay, is it eczema? Is it like, yada, 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 like prenatal, baby? So we did a lot of testing on Google, and nobody with the C-section campaign, nobody clicked on it. Like people just didn't care because I think they're not aware of the connection between C-section and baby gut issues, right? But eczema was huge. Immediately, The conversion rates were so high that we then knew to hone into that demographic, right? So it turns out that the prenatal, we thought, oh, people wanted to prevent, set their babies up for lifelong health. So moms want to test their gut and vaginal microbiome during pregnancy, and then babies too. It turns out that nobody was interested in prevention. It's just a harder sell, right? Like again, vitamin versus painkiller. So the prenatal product was a vitamin. I didn't need it. And then people were optimistic, thinking that, oh, my baby's not going to be,
Of course, no one expects their baby to have issues and have challenges.
Yeah, and that's how we uncovered that. Oh, then the eczema allergy kind of use case was the painkiller that people were like waking up in the middle of the night, Googling baby eczema. And when you find Tiny Health and it's like eczema may be linked to your gut health and they clicked on it, they buy. We knew that was the marketing message we needed to go out for and so that's how we started with a lot of Google. And before we moved on to Meta, which is a way more expensive top of the funnel platform to users.
And how do you still define that that's a big enough of a market, or did it not matter? And to be clear, like you also had a lot of setbacks, I'm sure too. I mean, I actually remember when you guys were starting and we were thinking about investing, a lot of my friends were having babies at that time. I asked a lot of the moms, I was like, hey, like, would this be something you would buy? And essentially universally, they were like, no, I'm not interested. Maybe sounds cool, but wouldn't be willing to pay a few $100 to figure this out, this information. Luckily, against their opinions, I still invested. But at the same time, like, how did you decide that's a big enough of a market of like, okay, a small percentage of maybe lots of moms worry about their children's eczema or things like that. But there's also a small percentage of those moms who are maybe willing to spend extra money to help fix it or make it better before it's really a problem. How do you still make a decision, I'm going to go after that market and make something happen?
Yeah, and the friends you asked may have had, kids or babies who didn't have any symptoms. Maybe it's not quite the target demographic. What really worked for us early on was the eczema allergy kind of baby group. Now, of course, sleep issues, constipation, there's just so many symptoms, keywords that we're ranking for and things like that. Babies who are vaginally born can have issues too. When their moms or dads don't have bifidobacteria, this beneficial bacteria that is really essential for immune training in a baby. So you want to see 50 to 90% of the baby's gut colonized by bifidobacteria. So if mom doesn't have it, dad doesn't have it, older siblings don't have it, even through a vaginal birth or breastfeeding, the baby's not going to get it. And then they're bound to get symptoms. So because we knew the science behind it, we're like, this is a large enough market that it's not like a market size that is static, right? Like every year, 5 million babies are birthed every year, right? So you will have 2 million babies who are exactly your target market. Again, 2 million sounds very small, right? A niche market, right? Again, we knew that was a niche market for us to enter initially, build up the use case, the data, publish data around the outcomes, build our brand. The trust in the community was so important to gain that trust. And it took a while to get there, but I was very, very persistent. And there's a lot that went into how I built the company because I was not a microbiologist. I'm not a doctor. How do I get the trust of parents, right? So I really did recruit a board of advisor. We have 2 boards. One is the medical board and one is a scientific board, right? Because you want the science from academia. People who are writing these papers I was reading, I wanted to recruit them to be on my board. And then medical people, because, ultimately people go back to their doctors and ask about it. So they want to see that there's my OBGYN. Is there an OBGYN on board? Is there a pediatrician on board? Who else is kind of like validating this test, right? So I established that board from the get-go because I wanted to build the company from the right foundations, very science-driven, very evidence-based. Everything we recommend, every insight is cited. We have a white paper we're publishing and all that. So, that building that trust was really important to me. And so over time, obviously, we got testimonials, we got impact, we got outcomes, and we kept kind of using those case studies. And because our test really does work really well in reversing and preventing risk of these chronic conditions, it speaks for itself. So over time, word of mouth spread. And so then once we always have a hypothesis that once the parents see how impactful our test is for the baby, they're going to do it themselves, right? The mom and the dad will do it. And then when they have their next baby, they're going to do it for the next baby too. So the repeatability, that's where, again, this theory that is it a large enough market, there's a repeatability element to it. So if 23andMe the really famous D2C genetic tests that I won't emulate. $1 billion company from a genetic test that you do only once, because you don't need to do genetic testing multiple times. Your microbiome changes, right? So there's a, a very strong repeatability use case here. So like, and then ultimately we want to serve adults too. And then you look at stats like CDC stats. So for over 40% of kids have at least one chronic condition. And when it comes to adults, that number is 78%, which is crazy high. I didn't want to start in the adult market because it's so noisy. If you look at gut health and how often that's mentioned for the adult market, there's so many supplements trying to target adults and all that. So I think it would have not been smart if I entered the adult market from the get-go. I wanted to build the brand from the baby into adult.
So it sounds like it was very intentional to think what market you're going to enter, why you're going to enter it. Walk through a little bit more. Like you talked about founder market fit, right? So why were you the right founder to solve this problem? And as you mentioned, you didn't have a medical background. You were a CMO of other companies. You had sold a sort of a couponing company to Walmart Labs. Like, why was there a founder market fit here?
Yeah, so I have a backstory. So you were in On Deck, right? So I was in On Deck One as a sponsor. I was SVB's EIR. They only had they had two EIRs at the time, and then I joined On Deck Two to find a co-founder properly. And On Deck Three, I was just coming back because I knew the team really well. So in On Deck 2, I was looking for a co-founder, and I really wanted to build my next company in SaaS. I was pretty gung-ho about it. And then that was when I had just had my first kid, and I was kind of...
How did you know? Sorry to pause really quickly for a second before you get into the story more of Tiny Health. Why did you know you wanted to go build another company? And this is a little bit more of the history side of things, but like, how did you know you wanted to continue to build companies? Okay, like, you're an EIR at SVB. You're making a good name for yourself. You did some cool stuff at Walmart. You have a great name. Why go back into the crazy world of founding another company, especially when you're like about to have another baby or something like that? Like, that's usually a crazy decision to go have a human baby and a startup baby.
Yeah, the short answer is that it's in our DNA, right? I think as founders, once you hit the founder bug, it's always going to be with you. Nothing else will come as close to that euphoric feeling of founding a company and building something that people really want, right? So I think, it's not for everyone, right? Look, it is really hard. My husband's also a founder. So between the two of us, we started the company around the same time too. He has a different company. And then now I have my third kid. So I have a 6-month-old now. So it feels like the Tiny Health is actually my third baby, and then my fourth child.
Wow, it's a lot of kids to deal with.
A lot of kids, but I think we're the crazy kinds, right? I think the founder DNA, like if you started a company and you go back to it, you are really the crazy one.
100%. Well, that's why, like, for this podcast is talking with multi-time founders and understanding that. And we'll have to get to the point where how do you deal with all of these children in a sense, but I don't want to get there yet. So yeah. Talk through a little bit more. Okay, fine. So you're on deck, you're wanting to go start a new company, you're looking for a co-founder, want to do SaaS because that was a hot thing.
Before that, I was a CMO at a couple other startups, and it just never felt right. I couldn't quite build the culture that I wanted at those companies because, the culture really trickles down from the top, right? From the CEO and the founder, it goes down. So, and they were like these companies I joined. One was a crypto startup, one was a coding bootcamp. They were very bro-y, right? So it's kind of like, a little bit different. I couldn't build the culture that I wanted in a way. So I really missed, I guess I'm a control freak. I really wanted to build product the way I wanted to build, but I didn't want to I was really resistant to building a company that was very like female oriented or like baby or parent oriented and be kind of like categorized in that she's building company for her, whatever, your baby parent thing. So, during On Deck, we were brainstorming what companies we each should build. And I was in SaaS for a little bit. I was in LiDAR imaging a little bit, like just so many different kinds of ideas. And then they kept saying, I think like they kept saying, because I had Charlie, my daughter, who had eczema, as I was sharing that story, and they're like, you should build a better biome for babies. And then, everyone was just telling me, because I was so passionate about gut health, And I was explaining the signs, and they were like, "This is the perfect company for you to build, Cheryl. You have the story with Charlie C-section, and like it's just the perfect founder product fit." I was pretty resistant. I'm like, I don't want to build this company just because I had this experience. But kind of like through my journey, kind of trying to build this. We try to build this sales product, and I don't like sales. I'm not a that said, I am a pretty good salesperson now, but I didn't like to build sales tools, like a superhuman for sales was my co-founder was building at the time. And then I kept being drawn back to this idea that because I had my C-section experience, I really dove into the research. I knew so much about gut health in the first 1,000 days. I was like, if I don't build it, who else would, right? A guy who's never given birth? No, I have to solve problems that I care about, I'm passionate about, and I know really well because I believe that anyone can be an expert in something if they put into the time, right? Like the one 10,000 hour. So if you spend enough time, you can be an expert in it. So I didn't let that be a barrier to me. That the fact that I didn't have any microbiology knowledge, I wasn't a medical person. When I really kind of like told myself I was, okay building a company. But again, I kind of like wanted this to be much larger than serving just babies or kids. I knew that from day one, everyone should do a gut test, but I needed to build a case for it. I needed to build an entry point that made sense, that also touched upon my own personal story and my own personal health journey with my kids and myself, and kind of like built a market.
And do you think that's one of the big things that leads to success for founders is making sure there's that real personal connection and it's unsolved? They've obviously done all the research. Like, I cannot find a solution for this anywhere, or I've tried all the solutions that exist and all of them, like none of them really solve this. Is that the spark?
It's hard to say. There's so many great companies that have been built. Sometimes there are companies that are building tools to disrupt a certain existing tool. So I wouldn't say that if there's already kind of like a solution out there that you couldn't be the better solution. If there's already an existing solution, the only difference is that you have to be 10x better than the existing solution, right? For me, I was building something kind of, I would say, completely new category, completely new market. So new category in like there's existing stool tests for adults, but none for babies. So it's kind of like a new market in a way for the parent baby audience, right? And the category is the stool testing. There are existing stool tests in the market, but so I was kind of leveraging that category for a new market in a way. So it's a tougher market to enter, and it's novel, and it's something that is maybe harder to do than an existing market.
How do you go about though figuring out like, okay, I'm going to go, like, especially for you as a non-scientist, how do you go in and start saying like, we're going to literally build from scratch the ability to do this testing? That's sort of question number one. And then related to that, how do you then convince investors as well? Because as you mentioned, like Ubiome was a warning signal for a lot of people. I was an investor in Ubiome as well.
Yeah.
And so like, that was probably for a lot of VCs, that was a warning. Like, these guys tried, they essentially committed fraud to try to keep their business going. They're still, I think, on the run from the law, which is crazy. How are you able to essentially say, I'm going to go build literally a scientific test?
Yeah.
Like, get the whole, I wouldn't know where to start as a founder who's been in sort of software most of my career and services.
Yeah.
If I were to go build a biological testing company, I would have no idea where to start. Like, how do you learn about that? How do you get yourself really smart there and build something?
That's a great question. So firstly, addressing like, there was a prior company trying to do this in the space, you buy them and they failed terribly and a lot of investors lost money. That was a founder problem. That was an ethical integrity problem, nothing to do with the science. The science was definitely emerging at the time they were using 16S. Now that technology is outdated and being replaced by shotgun sequencing, which is what we used. But that said, at the time that their tech was good, it was mostly founder fraud, right? So it's important to differentiate that. Yes, I went into this knowing that there's going to be a lot of investors who's going to be afraid to reinvest in the space, but that didn't deter me because fundamentally you have to have the founder conviction that gut testing is something important. It's foundational to health, to overall health. Just like sleep is foundational to your general well-being and health, gut health is one of those foundational things, right? So you have to have that core belief that this is so important that there will be an emerging category defining company that will be leading in the space. And I want to be that company, right? So then how I went about building something I have no knowledge in, it was definitely scary at first, but one of the co-founder that I was building the SaaS company, we ended up splitting up. And he was the one who's like, Cheryl, you need to go build this company, Baby Gut Health Times. I met this scientist at Mayo Clinic in their microbiome research arm. You should talk to him. And so I talked to him. His name is Ruben Mars. He became my founding scientific advisor. So I was like, Ruben, teach me about microbiome sequencing and the tech and all that. I didn't know anything about it. So he was great.
Why was he willing to spend any time with you? Or why would he be like, okay, here's some random tech founder who thinks she knows, she's read some research reports and she had a baby that who has some eczema or something. Like she wants to go build a company. Why would he give you any time? Like, well, how did you convince him to spend time with you?
Yeah. Like, I think, after one meeting, for example, he was like pointing me to some resources. For example, he pointed me to a sequencing course at Minnesota, I think, Dan Knight's course. So I took the course and then I came back to him 2 weeks after and asked him intelligent questions between what is the difference between qPCR, culture, 16S that UViome use, shotgun sequencing, and RNA, and I was taking copious amounts of notes and repeating back to him what I understand or not. And so like he saw that I took effort. I dived into the research and the technicalities of it. And I wanted to basically in 1 month be kind of like informed enough and educated enough about the tech that I can speak to a scientist or a medical person as if I knew, So that was my goal. And I guess when he saw that, he was like, okay, she really did her homework. And, Ruben, at that point, he had consulted with a rival. He had some experience advising founders or companies in the space. So we just really had chemistry as well. And then he ended up like giving me his time. Like every week we were on a call initially every 2 weeks. And then he sent me papers and I kept like, okay, can we reach out to this professor at Johns Hopkins? And then he ended up being my advisor, Noel Mueller, because he wrote the paper that I read that impacted how I was able to intervene my daughter's gut health. And so slowly, I kind of over a period of maybe 6 months, built conviction that I could actually build this.
So as a founder, how did you end up pushing all this stuff forward in like the right ways that could become the real expert there? So in other words, like it sounds like what you did was like, I'm just gonna get really smart in this space and go talk to as many people as I can, and work your way in. And even though you didn't have the credentials, find a way in. Is that what like the best founders do?
That's what I did. I don't know if that's what the best founders do, but some of the other best founders I've met and invested in have a particular niche that they found because they work at another company and they saw the problem because they were at this company that no one else had, right? So they have this insight and then they come out of that company to build a solution for that. So I like those founders because they have knowledge and intel that no one else does. So either like that is a good kind of recipe for a good founder, or someone may not have the expertise, but they have that personal story and the connection. And you can just tell that they are so passionate and have such high conviction in this problem space and solution space that they're just going to do anything they can to be an expert in it and to be the best solution for the problem, right? And I'm in that second category.
That's not even my experience. I mean, the best founders are ones who just are incredibly passionate and willing to work really hard to understand and learn about that problem space, even if they aren't previous experts in it. What is this sort of a tangent to this a little bit, but how often do you think it's important to have really good advisors versus not? So, and let me explain my biases. A lot of times I think having lots of founders, like say, Social Street, here's my team, and it's like 4 great founders and then like 8 amazing advisors. And I'm like, dude, I don't care that you have 8 amazing advisors. It's like almost irrelevant to me. But it sounds like in your case, maybe that was really relevant to have those advisors, that because maybe you weren't an expert previously in it and it sort of validated you? So like, when is it good to have lots of advisors as a founder? And maybe when is it good not to have a lot of advisors?
I think it's incredibly important for you as a founder to understand what kind of advisory board you want to build. And each advisor that I brought on was filling a certain gap in my personal expertise. So either like early on, I think the types of advisors that you need in every stage of your company changes, right? That's kind of why you have the standard 2-year term. So early on, I needed people to frankly tell me if I'm building this in the right way that would garner the credibility and attention of academia, because I didn't want academia to come and see this as, snake oil and poo-poo me, right? Because I was reading these academic papers. So I really wanted academia to validate and kind of be my like credible source, right? And it turns out the medical industry has no idea about gut health because no doctors go to school learning about the gut microbiome. They don't even learn about nutrition. So in the process, I learned that it was really hard to find medical advisors who understand what I was talking about. It was almost the other way around, where I was teaching them about the gut microbiome and the vaginal microbiome. But what they served early on was credibility to my users, right?
Totally.
My scientific advisory board was to help me make sure that I'm building the right foundations and evidence-backed platform. And then my medical advisors was for the outside credibility for all my customers and consumers, right? And then now I'm in a phase where like I need a different set of investors to grow the company, to like, be sort of like, we're so known in the baby space. And now we have a lot of channel distribution in the longevity space. So we need to start building advisors in a longevity space, right? So we just need, and then someone who can help grow the company, for example.
How do you use advisors the right way? And I really say that in the sense that I've historically found, and I think I'm not a good founder on this front, to be clear. I've historically found that advisors, it takes a lot of time to recruit them, to get them on board, and then most founders don't really do much with them. Like they put them on their website, they put them on their fundraising deck, and that's about it. And so you've given up all this equity to people who are doing almost nothing. Best founders to do a lot more and get those advisors to actually do a lot of real work. How do you weigh those two things?
I mean, initially when I started, again, like the scientific advisors really was on calls with me every week, every other week, so I really involved them. And my medical advisors were just there frankly, for show, because they didn't know anything, right? I would teach them, right? So again, you kind of know what they're for, and you may not be giving each of them the same amount of equity, right? And frankly, some more, I have business-oriented advisors too that I don't list on my website because they're just kind of like there for me to like answer questions, or when I need hiring help or whatever. It's true. Like I don't actually even leverage all my advisors all the time. So in my next set of advisors, I'm recruiting really strategically, right? For certain reasons, right? They have to have a large following. They have to have published books, and they have to be an industry kind of opinion leader that people follow. And so they're there for the credibility, for example, not necessarily to give me advice. Sometimes they advise on the clinical utility side of things. But also I want to say with AI, I'm leveraging AI now to build my advisory board. I have an AI council. So you just kind of adopt, like say, like you can create your own advisory board through ChatGPT. Just say like, hey chat, I call ChatGPT chat. Adopt the persona of this person and this person and this person. And you are now, and you can create different personas in chat, and you have the pro version. And so I have like 4 or 5 advisors with different expertise. So mimicking real life advisors, but it's free, right? In a way. Yeah. And then if I have a marketing question or go to market question, I ask this advisor. If I have a fundraising question, I ask this advisor. And, it kind of is my debate partner, right? Of course, it doesn't mimic the real advisory board, where certainly some VCs and your actual like board of directors from fundraising, your actual board can help with connections, right? And introductions and all that. Certainly, like that's how I think advisors and investors can really add value to your company. But beyond that, for real like business advice and all that, like you can leverage AI these days.
So I totally agree for the advice part. Yes, you can get it, but the challenge, well, a few questions there. So one, how do you make sure you're asking the right questions of your advisor? So I find once again, like a lot of people build these advisory boards, but then they don't ask any questions to those people. So they're not looking for real advice. Sort of the question number one. So how do you get good at asking those questions? In thinking, I want to ask these people instead of asking my, you might have a CMO right now at Tiny Health. How do you decide I'm going to ask my marketing advisor, AI marketing advisor versus ask my CMO?
A lot of it is, like you always hear that founder and CEO is a lonely journey because there is just like nobody understands what you're going through. You have a lot of doubts sometimes. So like you need a sparring partner and debate partner. So that's why kind of having a co-founder is helpful with that. But some things the CEO can't even tell, your co-founder because they don't understand the level that you're kind of like facing, right? The level of stress or like your the need. So I find that like asking the AI is actually really helpful as a debate partner just to check in, sanity check. Hey, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about raising this much money and giving away this much equity or not. Like, what do you think? And having that thought partner is really important for me. I think like with real advisors, sometimes it's like just like, oh, I have to reach out to them and schedule a call and take time. I don't have time for this. So that's kind of why building my advisory board through AI has been way more impactful and useful for me personally, because I get that sparring partner, right? Again, it boils down to why are you building that board? What is it for? If you're building boards for connections and having them open their Rolodex, that is a different kind of a goal, right? So you just need to be really clear. Why are you building your advisory board and for what?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, and you sort of hinted at, right? So if you're bringing on marketing advisors and you're calling them an advisor, I'll reframe it a little bit. Tell you this is accurate, though. Of course, you're essentially bringing on a marketing consultant and essentially paying them with equity for their network or their brand name and things like that. And so, yes, you might want to call them an advisor because it sounds better, but in reality, like you're sort of hiring them. And to be clear, like some of the best companies in the world did this. An example would be Palantir. I remember speaking with one of the founders of this really early on, and he said, yeah, like we would hire generals, like 4-star generals who were like retired as our like advisor. But those advisors had really clear specific metrics. They were like, you need to make an intro to 10 different people at the Department of Defense. And if you don't, we will fire you as our quote unquote advisor and you will not get all the equity that we promised you because like you're essentially on contract. We call you an advisor because it's nicer, but we're essentially hiring you for a specific outcome. And if you do not achieve it, you will no longer be working with us.
I'm a fan of that. I like advisors being held to a certain kind of like milestone or certain like outcome. Again, like if that's what you want from them, the connections, then make it really clear and have stipulations where you can kind of pull that back, right? But it doesn't happen very often, as you may know. It's just once you pull equity back, it's kind of burning a bridge, right? So you really ideally don't do that. But I would say make expectations clear. And I don't offer advisory positions so freely. For example, today I met with this lady who's a doctor who's really well known. And someone introduced me to her saying, oh, she could make a great advisor. I don't even say that on the first call. I just want to see if there's chemistry. Is she letting me in? Is she engaged? Is she going to use our products for her patients? If she isn't even excited, I'm not going to tell them. Because if you just start the call with, I'm considering you as an advisor, everyone's going to want to get your shares, right? And they're just not going to do anything, right? So a lot of times advisors are a waste of shares, options and money. So you just need to be clear what you want out of them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Changing topics a little bit. I want to just dive into your history overall as a founder, right? So you go to school, you then have sort of normal jobs a little bit, your early career. What made you decide to become a founder in the first place, right? That is a big sort of life decision to go do that. What was it in your DNA or upbringing or whatever that made you decide I want to take this crazy journey?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was the kid I didn't have lemonades in Malaysia. I grew up in Malaysia. I didn't have lemonades there, but I was the kid who would just find a reason to create a company, a business, selling stuff. I was selling my parents' junk in flea markets, for example. My mom had a catalog business, like a direct marketing business where she would have extra inventory and I would just go door to door and sell off her inventory for pocket money. So it's like I was doing all these things and there wasn't a notion of entrepreneurship at the time, right? But it's always been in my DNA to like, so to speak, make money when I was younger, but kind of, through that process, I learned the art of selling, convincing people that what you have is what they need, so I got really good at that, I would say, when I was a child. And then in my high school, there was a young entrepreneurs program where we can actually create a real company. And I had a taste of that there. So I think a lot of the childhood early exposure was important. My mom also had her own business. So I had a role model where I was like, yeah, I want to be just like my mom. Then in post college, I came here on a scholarship, and I had my own journey to get a green card. So I was in management consulting in New York City at the start, and it was during the financial downturn in '08.
Yep.
So it was a terrible time to be in management consultant or finance. We had a lot of fintech customers like Amex and whatnot, and it was just a really tough time. And I was pretty like almost on the verge of depression, overworked and miserable. And it wasn't until I got my green card through my company through the consulting company at the time that I'm like, okay, now I can just leave the consulting world. What am I going to do? And I found, at the time YC was just starting up, 500 startups. So I had some friends who left New York to go to Silicon Valley to start companies. Again, like mentorship, right? Like then the guy Ray was a mentor and kind of mentoring me and like, okay, this is how you build a tech company. Because I was thinking business, like old school selling, like, I don't know, earrings or something like that. And then so I got into this notion of, okay, how do you build a high growth tech startup?
Yeah.
And that was when I left my consulting job to build my first company, City Pockets, that pivoted to Reclip It and eventually got acquired by Walmart Labs.
Okay, interesting. So that's how you got it all started. And then once you were in it, I mean, then you go to Walmart Labs, and why not stick around there for a while, right? That's sort of a safe job, probably good.
I wanted to, yeah, like I wanted because I had the golden handcuffs, and I was their staff PM, really kind of redoing Walmart.com at the time, and implementing store and couponing for them. And then the government of Malaysia and the White House team at the time came to headhunt me and was like, "You are a successful entrepreneur. We need someone to go back to Southeast Asia to lead the startup ecosystem there." It was kind of like a really out of the blue opportunity, and they presented me with $30 million in funding to kick off, high growth startup.
Pretty amazing, right? To have like the U.S. government and the Malaysian government come to you and say, "Hey, we're going to give you $30 million to go do something." Like that's pretty crazy. How did you know how they found you? Like what about your background at the time made them interested?
I think they were looking for a Malaysian founder, and there's only a few of us in Silicon Valley at a time. They hosted a dinner and found out that I had just exited my company. So I was like that success case that they were looking for.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like comfortable, as you mentioned. I had just sold my company. I was living the life. I was speaking at conferences, mentoring, investing in startups. It was pretty hard to leave, but it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to build this kind of foundation to support entrepreneurs, right? And because I got a scholarship from the government of Malaysia when, and that brought me to the US, I felt like I just wanted to go back and give back to not just the country, but the whole region. So it was just an amazing opportunity I couldn't turn down. And it was definitely political. I learned that anytime the government is involved, there's a lot of politics, even though they promised me that it would be apolitical and they won't interfere. They did interfere. So that's kind of
What does that mean? Like how do they interview? Like telling you who to invest in? I don't know what the 30 million was earmarked for, but
yeah, it was a lot. Too much to go into on this podcast. Maybe over beers next time. It was pretty bad in the sense that they wanted me to, yeah, like give funding to certain groups of people, or there was a lot of corruption in Asia that was like, I didn't understand how that happened until I was there. I would refuse to do any of that.
well, people knew that suddenly you had like $30 million to go spend, and they're like, you need to kind of give it to me.
Kind of, yeah.
And they're going to be pretty well. It doesn't matter what our idea is. We're just going to scare her enough to pay us off.
Yeah, they really tried to threaten me, death threats. They marked my car, things like that. But I have really strong integrity. And I had to convince the whole startup ecosystem in Asia, in Southeast Asia, that I wasn't there for the wrong reasons. I was really there to help them. And so I went out and really, again, it's similar to like building Tiny Health, like the community and the trust from ground up, a grassroots trust is so important. Like not like top down, like PR things. So I spoke to the community. I went and give talks. I met what entrepreneurs in that region one-on-one to understand their problems and realize that their problems in Southeast Asia is not the same as problems we have in Silicon Valley. Totally different, right? So because they were like, oh, you're flying in from the US, you're trying to adopt Silicon Valley principles to our region. It's not going to work. So I really had to change the narrative that no. I'm going to just delete everything I've learned and how I built companies in New York and SF. And I'm going to learn what you guys need, what your problems are, and I'm going to help you solve it. And I have to gain that trust for why I'm the person who can help them, right? So I did that. I had to do that really quickly over 6 months and gain that grassroots trust and build it from there. And so when these threats came in, I had such strong community support, grassroots support. And then within a year plus, I published an impact report to show outcomes. So really similar to what we're doing at Tiny Health now, we're publishing a paper on how we're creating better outcomes for infants. I did that at Magic as well, the corporation that I built in Asia to build that trust, right? So when these threats came and they wanted me to do things I didn't want to do, and I held my integrity high, it almost like they couldn't touch me because I built such strong momentum with the founders and the VC community in Southeast Asia that they couldn't really tell me what to do.
And is there any advice you have for founders, kind of for overseas, non-US born founders, when it comes to you're building a company in their own home country or Malaysia, let's say, versus building it in the US? Like, what sort of advice do you have for people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like from that experience, if you're looking to build, some founders in Malaysia or Singapore wanted to build company for the Southeast Asian market of 300 million people, right? It's really hard to build companies cross-border. If you really want to target audiences here, move here to really understand. I think you need to be close to your audience, close to your customers, right? If not talking to them every single day, you have to like understand the cultural nuances.
Do you invest in, are you an investor or an advisor to any companies in Southeast Asia, or have you kept your investments to companies based in the US?
I only was when I was there. Again, then I knew the company, I knew the founder. So much of it early on was all about the founder, right? I wouldn't invest in companies just straight out from the deck. It's all about the founder, right? So then when I moved back to the US, I invested in some US-based companies, but now I'm kind of solely focused on building Tiny Health. I'm not really actively investing anymore.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Okay, so you do that for I know a year plus, whatever. And then what, you go into 500 startups? Like, what happens then after that?
Oh, 500 startups was from my first company, actually, from New York.
Okay.
And then I did apply to YC, didn't quite get in, and then I was batch number 3 at 500 startups. So really early on. But now, no, we're beyond the accelerator phase. For Tiny Health, because this was my second company, and I had experienced the whole exit and all that, I really wanted to build this company that's very mission driven. And I wanted to raise money from the right investors who wouldn't push me to do things I wouldn't want to do, like grow at all costs. I really wanted to build strong foundations. I wanted my unit economics to make sense, for example. So yeah, this company, I'm taking a slightly different approach now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then going back to something like the early, like fundraising 500 startup stage, like, I mean, you were, I think, what, I don't know if time person of the year is totally correct, but like a silence breaker, all those things, because you went through a kind of tough situation at 500 startups. Like, what was that situation and how did that change you as a founder and presumably make you stronger because of it after going through, I'm sure, a really tough situation?
Yeah, like, I wrote about my story about Dave McClure, who's the GP and founder of 500 Startups, sexually harassing me in my own apartment. And that broke out and he stepped down because of my story. I mean, kind of winding back to that story, like, I think female founders, unfortunately, are, beholden to that first check, right? Like, the first check is so important. And sometimes in that situation, like we get taken advantage of, right? So in that situation, it wasn't that I was trying to raise money from Dave McClure. I was in a different situation. I was actually running magic in Malaysia, but so many of my other female founder friends, had been approached, like, or inappropriate advances to them as they're trying to get their first check,
From you or just from other male VCs?
from other male VCs. And this is the whole Me Too movement back in the day, but specifically from Dave at the time. Um, again, like, I think it was really, it's a tough thing to talk about now, but it's when you're raising money, for example, personally, when I was raising money early on, I would, you have a lot of meetings with potential investors, right? This is back before COVID, but people were meeting in person. An investor would meet me at a bar, and then it would like, oh, I don't want to put money into you because I want to date you. So I get comments like that where
What do you even say to that? It's so awkward.
I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in dating you. So end of conversation, I left.
I mean, as
You're wasting my time. Like, why did you just waste my time?
correct. Did you find yourself just saying like, I'm just not going to meet any VCs at a bar anymore, and just like it has to be in their offices and like actually making more of a pitch, and it's more formal that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you learn. But again, this is where the male founders get the unfair advantage, right? Where they can bro it out in a bar and kind of build rapport through these social situations. And this is where, like, it's harder for a female founder to like build rapport in a social situation where they can, if you're not married, be put in that situation, right? So I have had other female founders wear an engagement ring on purpose, right? Just to like, like, hey, I'm engaged, even though they're not. They pretend to be, right?
Yep.
Or I wouldn't go as far as that. Like they would cut their hair short and wear really kind of like manly, masculine outfits. I'm not the kind of person. I stay true to myself, but it just goes to show how much more work we have to do as female founders to get that first check, and also learn to kind of avoid situations that are awkward like that.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. That must have been had it like after you went public with all that, right? That must have been really difficult because it probably took away a lot from the work you were trying to do to build companies. And like,
So that's the thing. That one differentiator to me, and if you read my blog posts, I was only able to do that because I wasn't building a company at a time. I was in between companies. I'd just given birth to my first child. And if I were fundraising and building a company at a time, I don't think I would have come out with my story. So it was the right timing in a way, and I felt like I was not speaking for myself, but for so many other women who couldn't speak up at a time because they were building companies, and I didn't want this to be a name and shame kind of thing. Frankly, if I were to meet Dave McClure on the streets right now, I'd walk up to him and be like, don't worry about it. I'm not one who harbors, I believe that people can change, and that, something people can learn from bad experiences. Right. So I don't know, like, I didn't want it to be about just kind of like, what do you call blacklisting people. It was more about, let's all learn from this. This is real. Let's not brush it under the carpet or sweep it under the carpet. This is a real problem. How are we going to address it? And when I came up with my story on my own blog, it was my own narrative, really factual. And then what can we do about it as founders, as VCs? Can we build in sexual harassment policies at VC firms so that founders who experience these things there is a way for them to go and report these things, right? So we established moving forward. I co-founded it with some other female founders to get VCs to establish these policies.
yeah, no, and it's made. I think from what I can tell, and I'm a male founder, I'm a little bit different, but like it seems like it's made a real impact in a really positive way. So thank you for being brave enough to do that.
Thank you.
I want to change tacks a little bit too, and spend a little bit of time talking about kind of three key things that make for, I think, a successful business and startup. So let's talk about a little bit about culture, building your team, in product building, especially as a product focused founder. So I don't know, you can take each one of those, whichever one you want to start with, like product or culture or team, whichever one is most relevant to get started with.
Yeah, I mean, we're at, let's see, 23 people now, and we're hiring 5 more people, right? We're hiring product design engineers, so many. And this is like, this is a scary phase for me between 25 and 30s when company culture breaks.
Yeah.
Um, and you need a kind of a different way of managing and leading the company. But I would say like my first 10 I took really seriously. I gave more equity. I gave them shares, in fact, not options, because I wanted them to feel like they are an owner of the company, right? That ownership was really important to me. And because like the kind of the roots of who you hire are going to hire other people in the future. So you want that to be really, really strong. You get to know them, their families. You want to get to know their motivations and why are they your first employees? Because the first set of employees is a really tough job, right? You get very little pay, a lot of equity, and you're like working a lot, and like the company could just crap out, right? Or it could be a really big success. So it's a certain kind of DNA of people that will be your first employees. um and so for me, because I was building a biological, like a biotech scientific company, and we built the bioinformatics pipeline ourselves, I could have outsourced that part, but I knew that because that will become a core IP, I needed to build that from the ground up. So I need to hire the right scientists that I didn't know how to. So Ruben was really helping me hire my first scientist. And I think I lucked out with my head of science, and she has been so foundational to our company building our science stuff. I plucked her out of academia. So this was her first corporate job or like startup really. And she has been amazing.
What did you do like to find her? Like, how do you go about recruiting someone like that, feeling confident that that person's going to be a success? Because you can't mess up those early hires. Like or if you do, it can be very devastating to mess up an early hire like that because you might set you back 6 or 12 months.
That's why Ruben played such a crucial role for me. He actually left Mayo Clinic to come work for me for 6 months. He took a leave of absence. This is how I was able to kind of build have a good foundation in the science. So he built the kind of original pipeline in a way. And then I hired some people from UBIM. Again, leadership was kind of the one that was committing the fraud, but the scientists on the team was actually really good. So because I had talked to a lot of them, I ended up hiring some of them who worked on UBIOM's original pipeline. Hey, come help me build this pipeline. Because UBIOM was just uh, transitioning from 16S to shotgun sequencing, and I wanted to build my company in this new tech, leveraging shotgun. And so the guy knew how to build my shotgun pipeline. So he was a contractor from Chile. And so he built my initial pipeline, and then we hired new like permanent members from there. So he helped me interview, Ruben helped me interview. So I had people who were experts in their field who interviewed, right? And then so I interviewed on chemistry and kind of, is this person coachable? Do they have the leadership potential? Like him, she was, I could tell she was a budding leader in the way she talked and how quickly she responded. They have to also work at a fast pace. From academia, you actually tend to get a lot of people who, from PhDs and all that, work at their own pace because their PhDs are like what, like 5-7 years.
Yeah, I mean they're not known for speed necessarily, unfortunately.
And so you really need to identify someone who like works at the startup speed and pace, right? So I really lucked out with Kim, and she is the perfect like scientific like leader in a startup.
And so, okay, so you spend, when you say like spend a ton of time recruiting those first 10 people, though, it's okay. You got Kim, great. You got help from Ruben on that. Was that the same for all the other first 10 people, or
Yeah, and then
what things you do to like make sure you recruit them? Is it just like I'm spending a ton of time with these people? I'm reading all the things they published. What can other founders copy or emulate to really get that great initial early team?
so I think hiring is one of the toughest things for founders and CEOs. I still think I have a hard time.
Why?
You
When you say hard time, in what way?
make some mistakes. I'm making less mistakes now than I did in my first company, where I think I had to fire. I've probably fired like 10 people in my old company. Like it was a smaller team. Um, but because I've had that experience in my first company, usually what happens is that if you just need to hire someone that feels good enough, or like, so I think this is one of the toughest thing about being a founder is we like, it's really hard for us to let someone go, right? Like, for example, early on, I had a marketer spoke the language I wanted to parents and was a great copywriter. And she had never worked in a corporate situation or a startup. She was a mommy influencer on Instagram. She was great at what she did, but she just could not operate in a professional way. It was really unprofessional, and I took too long to let her go. It just like, like if I had let her go sooner and bring in a professional marketer, we would have ran much faster.
Although in your defense, right? I mean, part of what makes it hard to fire is when you hire someone, you already think they're great. Like that's the whole point is like, you thought you found that perfect person for that role. And so it's really hard to be like, oh my God, I completely missed something in that process and we have to make a change. So what have you changed in your hiring processes nowadays to hopefully avoid those sorts of errors or reduce them? Like you can never avoid them, right? The biggest companies in the world, best founders in the world, fire lots and lots and lots of people all the time.
So two things here. One is sometimes certain people are great for the start. Like Megan was great for like writing the initial copy of everything and bringing that trust to the community. And after a certain stage, she just couldn't adopt to the professionalism of the company, for example, right? So like, you just have to recognize that and be okay with the departures. The second thing to your question, we implemented a case study for every new hire, and that has been materially materially impactful in the way we hire the right people. Is we do a case study. And usually that case study is between 5 to 10 hours. So it's a pretty lengthy case study. Because a lot of people, when they interview, they're great marketers of themselves, right? They can speak really well, but when it comes down to doing real work, and in collaboration, it really goes to show how they work, right? For example, when we have a case study, does the interviewee come back with questions? Because in real life, if you give them a task, they're going to have questions. They're not going to have all the information they want, right? So we tell the candidates, like, you can ask us questions, you can ask for things. So for example, for a marketing position, I remember one candidate asked, do you have a template so I don't have to rebuild the deck in, like a new like design? And then the other candidate didn't ask for it. So I gave the candidate that asked for it the template, and their presentation looked a lot better, for example, than the candidate who didn't, right? So it's kind of mimics, like, are they curious, or are they resourceful? Because at the start, you want really resourceful, scrappy first employees who know when to ask for help. This is one of our core values. Resourceful, but know when to ask for help, right? Because some people, they try to hack things themselves for a long time. They get stuck. They don't ask for help. That's not good either.
Yep. Who reads over? I mean, if someone's going to spend 5 to 10 hours building out a case study, that should deserve a decent amount of review. Are you spending like a lot of time reviewing what they put together? And then do you pay them for a compensation at all for any of that time?
Yeah, so we usually have like 4 parts of the cases, depending on what role. Obviously, the technical roles are doing actual coding and things like that, or architectural exercises. So, like, there's usually for example, in a marketing role or a partnership role, there will be a presentation. I want to see their presentation skills, their writing skills. There's an analytical component. So, do they know how to use spreadsheets or like, to calculate metrics, right? Because data-driven metrics are so important to us. There was one candidate who actually pulled out a physical calculator because he didn't know how to use spreadsheets. So, and in the sheet, it was all hard-coded numbers, and we were like, "How did you not use formulas?" And he pulled out a calculator, and we're like, "Okay, not the right."
Yeah. And so then when you're building that out and asking these questions, like, what then, once you bring them on board, are the things you do, like, is there a culture you're trying to set as a company? Like, and you think through not just what you're trying to set at Tiny Health, but some of the best cultures out there with other startups. Like, what do you look at for a culture you're trying to emulate, if any? Maybe not emulate many.
Yeah, so when we did our first offsite, when we were about 11 people, we did it in Cancun, because it was all inclusive. It was really easy logistically to do that. I wanted to create core values that didn't feel like it was top down. So I got a facilitator to help us kind of do an exercise for what we our core kind of commonalities and our values and things like that. And that became our core values. Now, I actually, before the offsite, had in mind what I wanted, what kind of culture, core values I wanted for the company. So I had some sort of framework. And then at the offsite, you want to get your team to be bought in and not feel like, you want them to feel like they were part of that core value process, right? So, but I kind of knew eventually I wanted these things. So it worked perfectly where I had like the sort of like the inkling of what I really wanted it ultimately to be. And then the team were able to contribute their thoughts. And then we ended up merging into like 5 core values, for example. So now we interview based off of looking for these core values. When we do 360 reviews annually, we kind of like rate people based on core values and beyond. But I also told my team when we did the core value session in Cancun a few years ago that similar to how you're hiring your first kind of set of employees, your first 10 or 20, the core values should be flexible and change according to changing times and needs of your company, right? So the core values we set up in Cancun, I just told my team at my offsite this year, which was last week, that 2 out of 5 of these core values may no longer be as relevant as they were 3 years ago. And now we should modify and edit these values to what we need right now. So that's how I think of core values, and it involved my team. And I think anytime you like I don't have transparency in my core values because I think that's a very like everyone says transparency, but kind of people glaze over that. But truly, what transparency means to me and my company, and my team can repeat this too, is there's transparency in decision making from the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning if there's a certain direction that we decided to go, like for example, now we're pursuing the longevity space. How do we go from baby to longevity? And make sure that every step of the way on the evolution of our company, the company is really aware of what led to that. If someone didn't work out and was let go, or they left, I'm really transparent about the thought process behind it. Sometimes it's really hard. Like if someone left because there was a conflict in personalities, in that moment when they leave, it's really hard for me to tell them why.
Yeah.
So it was really abrupt. For example, a few months ago, someone left like that. And then a few months later, when it's died down, calmed down, I bring that topic up again and tell my company, well, this was why this person left. It was a conflict of personalities. So the company really appreciated that there's true transparency in the way, the reason why things happen. I think your employees really appreciate that if you really explain the reasons why.
And I totally agree. And I think just overall transparency about decisions, how they're getting made, and why is important for everyone. Talk briefly. We don't have that much time left. Talk briefly about product building. How do you make product decisions and be a real product-led founder?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So early on, I was really involved in product, doing a lot of user research. I think this is part of validating the market and how big of a problem it is to them. Picking the marketing message that resonates with the users, right? So the eczema, food allergies, sensitivities, and all that really resonated with our community. And then objections, right? Like, understanding what our objections, how do we build that into the product? Because I'm not going to always be there to talk to the person. They trust me when I talk to them, but how do I translate that human in-person trust into the product, right? So early on, I think that's how I was really involved in the product is we realized people wanted to see PubMed articles when they were showing this weird bacteria name they have not heard of. And we told them this bacteria is good or bad. How do I trust that what you're telling me is true? So we ended up linking a lot of citations within our explanations, within the descriptions of the microbes. So now like people trust that what we say is kind of very legit. So like just little things like that. Now I'm in a BD position because I have a product team and an engineering team leading that. I am still really involved in product in the way that every email that comes into hello@tinyhealth.com, I read. I still have access today. So I would say
everyone's going to start hitting up that email button and get you as a founder.
the first 10,000 emails that came in the inbox, I read every single one of them. So I would catch things before my support team, my product team, my engineering team would catch. And I care so much about that because I want to hear the sentiment coming from users. So I would catch problems with fulfillment, problems with like people misunderstanding this marketing message or whatever. Like I would catch all that. So I feel like, that's what makes, like I think like our product, is so special is because in a way I have this full breadth of like view. I'm meeting customers every day. I'm meeting clients, partners, practitioners, parents, and I have a really broad perspective of the overall needs of the product and the company. Yeah. But not everyone can do it, right? You really have, which is why I say it comes back to being a crazy founder. You have to be so obsessed with building this company, the problem and the solution to go to that extent of reading every single email that comes in to inbox, right?
So that's actually a decent segue into the next question I want to ask, which is, given that you have to be so obsessed to build a great company, how do you manage that with the fact that you have 3 human babies, Tiny Health, your company baby, so you essentially have 4 children, and a spouse who you want to spend time with? How do you manage it all, given that you want to have each one of those things be a quote unquote success, and it's really hard to do that, and of course your own health and longevity and well-being needs to somehow fit in there too.
Yeah, it's really hard. But I think, some people think you can't have it all. Some people are like, you can. I don't know. I think like I'm trying my best to be the best mom. And I think I'm just really laser focused, right? I think what you'll notice is for female entrepreneurs, especially moms, we can multitask really well. That's one thing that men can't do very well. I'm not sure about men.
I mean, I think they can. But I hear you.
So I can do multiple things at one time. Like I would be booking my daughter's. She wants to do aerial silks, and my son wants to do hip hop. I will be booking that simultaneously as kind of providing feedback to my product team at the same time. I also am really good at outsourcing. So I outsource. I know obviously people do go to chore, and chore is a great alternative. I have a team of assistants sitting in the Philippines helping me do stuff. I have a full-time EA doing that. Great. So I'm really good at training people, like training staff to help me do a lot of these things. Smart. That I can delegate. But it takes time. So I think this is where most people fail. They don't take enough time investing in training that person or the team you're outsourcing to, and how do you get the quality of work that you want, right? And at the beginning, for 2 months, my assistant made so many mistakes. Normally, people would just give up and like, this is not working. I'm not getting the quality. I'm just gonna do it myself. But I persisted. He made a ton of mistakes, but I'm like, I kept training and training her. Like, for example, when she drafts my emails, I won't go in there and edit it and just kind of like correct it. I will tell her, change this email. I would narrate. I would audio kind of record, like, you need to capitalize this. You got the name wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I do that over and over again until she gets there, right? So this is how I like train a lot of my support staff. And now like it's a well-oiled machine. I feel like I have 5 people that I can delegate to that can produce the quality of work that I want.
So delegation's huge. I think many founders fail on that front actually. But how do you decide when to delegate versus just hire for experience? So in other words, you could, spend all this time persisting and really training this EA, or you could have said, I'm going to hire an EA who's maybe double the price, but already knows all these things and is like top tier expert. And same thing with every other thing in the world, right? You could say, I want to go hire the best marketer, or I'm going to hire a junior marketer who I'm going to have to train a little bit. How do you decide which way to go with that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on resources, right? And this is where I really do like the scrappy mentality of resource constrained companies and startups. Because early on, frankly, I hired a lot of more like junior level staff that I have to teach a lot and invest a lot because I just didn't have the money to spend in hiring really senior people. Like the kind of like what I see some companies who raise a lot of money doing is they hire like too senior of a person to come to their team too early. And that comes with ego, right? Yeah. And so that's one thing that I consciously didn't want to bring to the table. So I hired more junior staff that I knew I had to spend more time. But in coming back to, like, for example, the EA that I had to train, there definitely is a certain point where it's like, okay, this we're at a point where we've tapped out this level of skills, a skill level, and I need someone to upskill. So one, that person could upskill and could leverage up, but not everyone can, right? So you just need to know, and this is the hardest part about being a founder and CEO, is to recognize when it's time to continue investing in that low-level staff, or when is it time to hire more senior, mid-level, senior-level staff, right? We are at this inflection point right now where, okay, we are almost profitable. We have amazing growth, 2.5x growth year on year, and we are ready to hire more senior-level people and invest in the higher comp that you have to pay or whatever it is, right? So I think you just have to be really good at recognizing when to outsource, what level, and when to upskill.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Is there a single piece of advice that you would give to every single founder to be excellent? So going back to sort of where we started, in a sense, like entrepreneurial excellence, if you could boil it all down, all of your learnings, experiences, everything else, into a single piece of advice to achieve excellence, what would that look like?
One of my biggest superpowers, maybe I'll put it that way, is that I'm very responsive to everyone in a way. Like I've seen how, some founders or some CEOs aren't so responsive to either customers or employee needs. I see myself as, like doing a few jobs, right? Like one is, if you're early stage founder, you want to get to product market fit and prove that. So coming back to that early validation. And then the second job is, like the editor of your company, hiring the best people, and like edit comes back to what I mentioned just now in terms of you need to know when to hire the right people at the right level, right? So kind of PMF, and hiring the best people, and then making sure there's enough money in the bank, right? To, whether or not from a internal, like, profitability perspective or raising money to be sustainable, right? But kind of beyond that, I think, like, I'm just a really responsive founder to the needs of my employees, to the needs of my customers, my clients. And I'm like, for example, when I get an email, most people just like, oh, I'll read it later. I respond right away. Like, so I'm really fast, and that's how I can do a lot of things in a small amount of time. I'm really efficient with my time. And I think there's a difference between founders who put things off and forget to come back to it or never come back to it versus you just execute. Just like I'm biased towards execution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. So bias towards execution maybe is the answer to that. How can people find you if they want to get more information about you, Tiny Health, learn more? Where can they find you?
Yeah, tinyhealth.com. Pretty easy name to remember. If you write to hello at, I will read it. And but we're on Instagram, tiny.health, LinkedIn, you can find me, Cheryl Sew Hoy. Yeah, like someone funny, a random customer just LinkedIn like DM me, and he couldn't figure out how to send his sample. There was some missing information, and I responded to him.
Cheryl, thank you so much for the time today, being on the podcast. I appreciate it, and I know our audience will as well. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Adam. This was fun.